Welcome to Vital Moments. My name is Ron. I'm the lead pastor of Vitalpoint Church, and I have the privilege today of being the host on our podcast. And it's good for me to be here to interview Tony. He is our site pastor in Forest. He was actually wrapping up our Finding Peace in the Struggle series. And Tony, it's so good to have you here. You were talking about anxiety yesterday, and I got to tell you, man, it was such a great talk around learning to trust God in the midst of anxious times in our lives. And I thought what I'd do is just start by asking you, straight up to kind of give us a recap, a brief recap, and then I've got a more serious question for you related to how in the world we do this trust God thing. But just give us a quick general brushstroke on the topic yesterday for us.
Yeah, absolutely. What I would say is how honesty with God is what brings trust in moments like anxiety. Mm-hmm. So it's that honesty piece, even being honest with the people and our approaches with anxiety with others and ourselves brings about that what we talked about, the whole title of Finding Peace in the Struggle.
Yeah.
That's where we find that peace. So that's kind of like the simplified version of it.
So in essence, you were taking us to this place of really trying to find the ground to stand on where we trust God in the midst of anxious moments or times of anxiety in our lives. Can you maybe describe for us a time in your life where you experienced anxiety? And you shared a little bit yesterday. Is there something that comes to your mind that you could, share with us that would help?
Yeah. The first thought I had was actually becoming part of Vitalpoint Church, where I had this good rhythm, good going, and God was like, I have something for you, something else. But I was very comfortable where I was. And that would cause a little bit of anxiety for me because it was something new, something what God wanted for me. And it was those moments of trusting God where he provided people speaking into my life as I was honest about what I was going through that process. And I think it's paid off by being part of Vitalpoint Church and being part of church planting and just living out what God's called me to. But it took that struggling with these anxious thoughts of the unknown into what God had for me was big for me and my family.
Yeah, and I think that's that illustration from your own life about, you were in the comfortable space of ministry at another church. God started shoulder tapping you with the possibility of church planting in a small town with Vitalpoint Church. And I think that's often what creates anxiety in us is this uncertainty of the future, that anxiety that I love the way you described it in the message where you talked about anxiety creates a bit of that shaky ground that we stand on. But yet when we learn to exercise trust in God, we become unmovable because of who he is, right? He is that refuge. He is that shelter. And one of the thoughts I was having, and actually Desiree and I, my wife and I were talking about it this morning. We were talking about this idea that, she was reading something about this the other day, was that God doesn't expect us to handle our anxieties. He expects us to hand them over.
Ooh.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that you did that yesterday for us, right? It's that, or on Sunday, I should say, because not everyone's listening to this on Monday, but can you kind of talk about what it looks like to actually hand these anxieties over to God? Like, we talked off air before we hit record. Like, I was asked that question in Poplar Hill by someone who's new to church, a young adult that is exploring faith, is not yet a follower of Jesus. And she was very like, Ron, how do you do this? Right? How do you trust God with the anxieties? And she expressed that her life is filled with anxiety. Like, I'm gonna put you right on the spot, man. It's like,
Yeah, absolutely. So I was actually thinking about how in life we have so many of these examples. If it's trusting someone with something that we care about, if it's trusting someone else with things that we care for, or we're handing things over, or we need someone else to finish a task for us, and it impacts the bigger picture, or impacts us. I was thinking about schoolwork. If you're working with someone in a team, everyone has a part, right?
yeah,
And you're just like, hey, look at this. In the workplace, it's very similar as well, right? I believe, like, even as children, you go, there's a trust with your parents, and you're just like, hey, look, I'm gonna hand this over to you. I trust you with this. And I feel like we have all these moments. I believe we have all these moments in our lives to teach us these handing over, but it does come with shaky hands of like,
yeah,
God, I care for this. So those steps, I believe we can reflect back on our lives and be like, okay, well, I did hand this over and it may not have turned out well, but I'm hearing that God is different than people. God's actually what they say he is. So I'm
yeah.
going to learn how to trust in this God who people say he cares, that he can be trusted. So I believe we can reflect back on moments and see maybe some good ones and all that of handing over. We could begin to see, okay, I can hand over things to God.
Yeah, you had a couple verses that you used about casting, and I because I didn't get a chance to read your talk. I was in India, so I didn't take the time to read your talk, and I wondered if you were going to go into 1 Peter 5, right? That casting all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. There's a piece of there's a part of this that I believe we need to begin the practice of casting our anxieties over to him. And in that process of casting, we begin to experience more of his care in our lives. And that, I think, grows out of our relationship with Jesus. And I know not everybody that listens to this podcast or even comes to Vitalpoint are followers of Jesus, but it's birthed out of that relationship with Christ. Right. I saw this thing the other day, Tony, Landon McDonald. He was talking about going to a movie, and he said, we trust the director, we trust the writers and the directors to take us on a journey of this movie. We trust them that the story's going to unfold. It's going to unfold the way they want it to. They're going to take us to this place where some resolve happens. And we don't even know who those directors and writers are. How much more can we trust the director of our lives, who is God, and allowing him to, allowing ourselves to trust in him, that he cares enough for us, that he understands what is best for us. I don't trust God just because everything is going to work out in my favor. I trust God because he is all knowing.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Right. And that ability to cast all my anxieties because he cares for me. One of the things, I don't hope you're okay with this, that, you open up about your daughter B in your talk, and I've seen you with your kids. You visited us at our trailer, and I've seen her anxious moments, and I've watched how you tenderly care for her. And then a little while later, she was enjoying the moment in the pool at the campground, and you said, see, I told you you could trust Daddy with this. But it took that process of her getting to that place. And I think the beauty of God the Father, we are his children, and in our anxiety, we struggle with the trust. But yet when we get to that place, like we talked about off air, Proverbs 3 talks about trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, acknowledge him in all your ways, and he'll make your path straight. Oftentimes in the midst of the anxiety, the path doesn't feel straight. But when we get to the other side and look back, we'll go, oh, the path was straight. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I'm doing too much talking. I'm supposed to be the host.
No, I love it because it's so true. Just going back to B, yeah, that's just a simple word. With her being nonverbal,
Yeah.
we had to be very like clear, simple direction and word. And the word was trust. Like we even learned sign language of trust,
Yeah.
because it is a thing that is learned
Yeah.
or even broken down in our lives, where we have mistrust, where we go through all this process of hurt. And just believing that there's a God who cares is just massive. That He actually
Yeah.
just cares about all the struggles that we face, big, small, whatever it is. But He truly does care,
Yeah.
And it's evident in our lives. And I believe you're right. Like the zigzagging is like, well, it doesn't seem like He does
Yeah.
until you look back and see. Like I didn't grow up in church, and I remember saying, there's no way there's a God. Like
Yeah.
there's way too much stuff that's happened. Like,
Yeah.
and then I looked back after with these lenses, different
Yeah.
lenses, and it was like, wow,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. It's interesting. Before we went to India, before Dave and I went to India, there was some confusion with his visa, which you and I've chatted about. And so the week before we left, the Indian government denied his visa. And so we had to reapply. And it was a week where I had to release the outcome and trust that God's plan was going to unfold. Was it hard? Yes. Because I had to work through the process. Am I going to go to India by myself? The plan was we were going to teach this conference together. We were going to help. We were going to do this together. And then I had to rework everything in my head. Okay, am I going to do this alone? I had to trust God in that week. It was interesting. Now he got his visa and he went and we had a great time. What struck me about that week, as difficult as it was, because I was anxious, Tony, I had some anxious moments. The anxiety were the alarm bells that drove me back to trusting God. And what struck me about this, again, was, and I said this to my wife, I said this to Desiree, I feel like that week, and some people would look at that and say, what's a big deal? It was a pretty big deal. I felt like this week was preparing me for what the year was going to be ahead for us as a church and for me as a person in my leadership, because it was a week where I learned fully, like Tony, fully, I have to trust God.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to look back over the course of this year to January and saying God was faithful. Yes, and the outcome wasn't in our favor, but God was still faithful even if it didn't come out in our favor.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Behold.
Because he cares. What's that?
Yeah. Behold.
Behold. I mean, that's our theme, right? That's our
Yeah.
theme for the year. Behold.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, what does it say?
Absolutely.
Behold, God is my salvation.
Yeah.
I will trust and will not be afraid. That Isaiah 12:2, right? I will trust, right? Right at the very beginning of the year, we have this, this statement of behold. And the next thing you know, I'm having to live it out. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you brought up a good point how you actually did it. Part of one of the call to actions was how anxiety can be those little reminders of where our trust is at that moment.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, okay, well, now that I know, like, hey, I'm having this anxious thought, so I know I can shift now it over. And it is like this not instant shift. It's like, okay, God, I'm going to trust you, even though it's not going to look so perfect. Like or the visa, there's only 4 green lights right now. We're waiting for that 5th one.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's like, okay, we understand. And those are the moments where we trust, right.
Yeah.
And learn to trust and behold the things of God and how he provides. Like Connect Group was fantastic. Of people sharing those moments of anxiety and then coming to that place of like God, I'm so glad I trusted you with this. Like it's so cool.
I was thinking about this during your talk. Like when we got to India, Raja met us at the airport with his dad. And if anyone's ever driven in India, it can be a pretty terrifying experience. And I mean, there's basically no rules. Like no rules. Like one-way streets, no. It's just full chaos. Water buffalo, cows, dogs, people, tuk-tuks, cars, trucks, buses, and it's everything and everywhere. And it was interesting because I looked at Raja, our friend, and I just said, I trust you.
Nice.
You know, I trust you that you're going to get us from point A to point B safely every single day. And we drove a lot. And I had a lot of reflection on trust because, I mean, I only knew Raja through the last 3 years of talking to him on the phone and video calls and connecting, with what they're doing there in India. And then to see him face to face at the airport and then getting in a car with him, I had to trust him. Right. And
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
like when we had a couple of moments where I'm like, I'm about to see Jesus,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
think about how we learn to trust God, right? How you
Yeah.
have learned to trust God. You didn't grow up in church,
No.
right? You trust God through salvation in Christ. And then it's a journey of exercising the trust muscle by faith that God is good, that God does care, that God is faithful, that God is present, that he is all powerful.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lifetime,
Yeah.
right? It's a lifetime. I believe deep in my being that there is a journey of learning to trust God, with the little things and with the big things.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely is a lifetime. But it starts now. Like,
Right. Right.
not when you don't have to wait until the struggle happens to begin to trust God.
Yeah.
When you be present with God in the present moments, it's you build that trust. If it's, I walk when I'm walking the dog, I'm spending time in prayer,
Yeah.
and it's just you see that you have your drive. Maybe you're on the bus. Maybe you have this time. Maybe it's in the shower, whatever it is. It's about that communication that begins to trust, or it's opening up that Bible and or just having conversations and being real.
Yeah.
One thing that Bethany said to me, I wish she said to me so I could add it to the talk, but she said it after the talk. She said, when you pour out your heart to God, it actually reveals what's on your heart to yourself.
Wow.
Because
Yeah.
sometimes you don't know what's really on your heart all the
Yeah.
time until
Yeah.
you begin to pour it out, and you're just like, okay, actually, this is what's troubling me. This is what's actually causing the anxiety in my life. Because sometimes we can name it, sometimes we can't.
Yeah.
And when we go through the process of speaking to God,
Yeah.
it's great. There's so many things that come out of it, which are amazing and builds that trust.
Yeah. I think that's the key word right there. Builds the trust. And that is the journey of faith, is building that trust, that in the small things I'm trusting God, so that when the big moments come, I can take those bigger steps of faith, knowing that he is good, that he does care. And I'm just going to wrap this up for us, Tony. It's I just want to say thank you so much for being vulnerable. And one of our values as a church is that, that appropriate levels of vulnerability. I thought you did that really well yesterday. I really felt that this series in particular, you and I have chatted about this, is a powerful series where, I mean, we dealt with loneliness, we dealt with fear and depression and anxiety. And I believe that this is setting the tone for the direction of the year as a church, with the whole word of behold. And I believe that our connect groups are going to do some hard work of really diving in on even this topic of anxiety. And so I just want to say thanks for that. And if you're not part of a connect group, or you're just exploring things about the Christian faith, thank you for being part of Vitalpoint Church, or maybe you've been watching from a distance. Continue to pray for us as we prepare to continue to do what God has asked us to do with the kingdom assignment of starting churches in small towns across Ontario, and now I guess in India, as we continue to help support what God is doing in India through Raja and his dad. And it's just been pretty exciting. So Tony, thanks for this. And thanks to everybody for listening to Vital Moments. Did you have anything to add, Tony, or are you good?
No, I want to say, though, how exciting it is that we have new connect groups, not only in Forest, but shout out to Forest, but across all our sites, how Connect groups have multiplied as well. So we have new Connect group leaders in this conversation, taking that step. So it's just so cool how many people are being connected in
So what do we call people
region.
in Forest?
I don't know.
Foresters?
We call people, what do we call forest people? Isn't that what we call them?
Have to come up with a song.
Yeah.
Shout out to Forest, Clinton, Exeter, and Poplar Hill.
That's right.
Soon site number 5, but we can't reveal that yet.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for watching, listening, and participating in Vital Moments. Peace to everyone.